If you've been following along with this little Oracle deck mini series I've been doing, this is the video where it all comes together. There's a tag going around and it's called PB January Decks, and I was tagged in it by Erin over at The Witch of Saturn. And it's all about decks that fit perfectly, like peanut butter and jelly. And usually, what would come to mind would be tarot and oracle decks. But today I want to flip that and I want to prove that Oracle decks don't need tarot to work. So I've picked 5 Oracle and Oracle pairings that I think actually work. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's also about the way they speak and the way that they build a reading together. So, if you've ever felt stuck with Oracle decks or you're unsure how to use more than one at a time, let's get right into the video. The first pairing of 5 that I would love to talk about is the Sacred Wood Oracle and the Tree Whisper Oracle Secret Garden Edition. What I find so compelling and perfect about these two together is the Sacred Wood Oracle can almost act like a tarot if that's what you're more comfortable with. So there's a lot of human or human like imagery in this deck, which really harkens back to the comfortability of seeing human figures in traditional tarot decks. It also creates a visual and narrative story because seeing that human feels like you can place yourself in that scene and get a better grasp or a better idea of what this could mean. And it also just gives you a lot of context clues and visual information. Now, what also makes this work as a really strong Oracle and Oracle deck pairing, the phrase underneath the title in this center deck here, which once again gives you even more to jump off of in your reading. So, this is with the idea of not wanting to reach for a guidebook, wanting to have a smooth, natural flow to your reading while only using Oracle decks. What's really great about the Tree Whisper Oracle here is the use of the single keywords and the theme of the deck. So, we're building upon this Oracle deck's theme of the woods, of nature, of these natural elements, and we're bringing that in with the second deck with these trees and the greenery. So this is building into the story of the center oracle here, and we're getting really clear and concise keywords from the left and right sides of our spread. If we're just going to keep this super simple, let's just take what we see on the cards. We have find joy in the unexpected, harmony, and simplicity. Well, life is sure a lot simpler when we find joy in these small, unexpected things in life. That certainly brings more harmony to those joys because we're not looking for those big, huge, life changing wins. It's the small things that matter, like finding a flower. So you can see how this center card is still giving us a story like tarot would, which is why I find these two pair perfectly together because we're getting more than just 2 simple keywords. We're getting more than just the trees and the faces, right? We're getting those extra layers, which is what I think tarot does so amazing with Oracle. But this is just an experiment, so let's keep checking it out. This second pairing that I think works amazingly well is the Citadel Oracle and the Gallery of Hallucinations Oracle. Once again, in this example, like the first example, the Citadel Oracle is really tapping into that narrative tarot energy. So, with the Citadel Oracle being archetype based, we have that layer of narrative built into this Oracle and Oracle pairing. So, while we might not have the human element or that very visually scenic element of storytelling, we are bringing that in with the gallery of hallucinations. So, like with the first example, we had all the visual information and context in that center card, and the two outer cards were more thematic and building the world of that center card. Here we have the narrative through archetype, and we have the visual information and context clues through the gallery of hallucinations. So you can kind of see like where I'm balancing things at. Like if the second deck has this featured, then the other deck will have that featured. So we're not doubling up, we're expanding the layers using these very nuanced differences between these oracle decks. What is also really great about this spread here is that we're almost getting this visual start to finish story. From the awakening or that turning point in the reflections card through remembrance, almost like the end, looking back at where you started, where you came from, which then really plays into the sleeper card here with the cause and effect and clarity. So you could see how this narrative of this reading could really build out for you. These two decks are actually lifting and pushing each other a lot, and they are already really strong decks on their own, but together here, they are really pushing what oracles can do just on their own. So, with these two, we have the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit and the Faceted Garden Oracle. This would be a perfect example of slowing down with a reading with the guidebook. Say you aren't that familiar or comfortable with animals in an oracle deck. This would be the perfect opportunity to pull your cards, grab the guidebook, read the peacock page, and continue on with the reading. It's a slow burn reading. Instead of forcing yourself to come up and to feel like you got a sufficient answer, even though you don't have those corners to dig into for that context. Because with oracle decks like this, with just a title and then imagery or symbolism that you aren't familiar with or comfortable in the range of knowledge that that animal or object or whatever holds, it feels like you hit a wall, that you're stumped, that the messages aren't coming through, and it can be really frustrating, and you could start feeling like questioning your reading. Of course, we always want a reading to come through so naturally, so smoothly, and that it's just second nature and, it's a part of us, right? But this is a way to study. This is a way to slow down. So, the great thing here is you could use this as an opportunity to journal, to just reflect, to just have a quick read, and maybe it sticks in your mind and maybe it doesn't, but you're learning. You're getting a takeaway to then apply to the reading. So for me, I would read the peacock entry. If this was a time I chose to journal on the peacock, I would do that after the reading. But in terms of like getting my information, gaining some knowledge to move forward with the cards, I would grab whatever jumps out on me about the peacock and then hop into the cave and the nest cards of the faceted garden. So it's really just about slowing down and pausing in the reading. It's not always about cracking open a deck, whipping out the cards, getting the instant message, and stepping away. Of course, there's perfect times for this, but this is a good example of when that's not the time to do that. When you want to connect more with a deck. We always talk about deep dives or connecting more with a deck or learning more about the deck. Well, you have to use the deck to do that. And instead of putting pressure on yourself to do this big ordeal of learning the deck and only working with that deck, just chip away at it. When you use the deck, read the guidebook. Build it into your practice. It can be as simple as that. Here we have the Wild Chorus Oracle and the Witch's Wisdom Tarot that I have modded into an oracle deck. This is a great example of one of those more phrase-like or conceptual oracle decks, I'll call it. There may be a better name out there, but it feels, more conceptual, more boundary pushing in terms of the title, the keyword, the phrase. And then with the Witch's Wisdom here, I have pulled the keywords from the guidebook, so it still links very well to the original deck's intentions. This is a way that you could turn a tarot deck that isn't necessarily working for you into an oracle deck. Reference the guidebook. Does anything jump out at you in terms of what you could turn into a keyword or a phrase to mod that deck into? There's so many different ways you could turn a tarot deck into an oracle deck, and this is just one example of them. So now we have this opportunity of this oracle deck that did start with tarot origins. So those may come across through the artwork or not, and you could choose to include that into your context clues, into your visual information or not. It's just there to offer a layer to you. In this example, the tarot associations visually aren't that prominent, so it works beautifully as a transitional deck for an oracle. What I really love visually about this pairing is the touch of nature through both decks. The wild chorus goes into different places, more like still life paintings or more sort of graphic illustrated executions where there's some white backgrounds and like a central lockup in the center of visuals. The Witch's Wisdom brings in that very naturalistic visual, only embraces the world building and that narrative of nature to this deck. I love these for the theme, and I love these for the phrases of the wild chorus and allowing these keywords and short phrases of the Witch's Wisdom to build into this one. I love the idea of alchemy tying into the pomegranate seeds here, because from many makes one. From different sources, we mix into one. And we could see that visually here in the memory card with this waterfall starting as one, but splitting into three. So you could just think about all these different angles and layers that you could take this reading just from two oracle decks. Fifth example, we have the Tantric Dakini Oracle and the Terra Incognita Oracle. And I would say these would be probably my most challenging pairing here. This would be a pairing that I would move slowly through, that I would sit through, that would cause me to move a little more intentionally through, because we have the Terra Incognita here, which the keywords are rather different than your standard Oracle deck keywords. So it's not ones that you come across as frequently. It's like the pairing with the Animal Spirit Oracle, where if you don't have the previous knowledge or context to that word because you've practiced, you've experienced, you've come around it a few times, so you kind of have this base built, this library in your head, you could say, of like what to pick and pull from that word. So some of these words may be ones that are more uncommon and you may need to sit with it. And then with the Tantric Dakini here, the phrases or keywords also play in that vein of unusual. It's once again, you're just not encountering it as commonly as you would say a word like observe. What I love about this pairing is not only visually do they play off of each other into this sort of otherworldly realm, but the single keywords really lift the phrase of this and add some more weight to it. It makes me think of rebirth. It makes me think of that life and death. Pulling in the keywords of evoke and alter definitely give me that sense as well. So these are almost working as clarifiers to this oracle. Whereas some of our previous pairings really felt like both decks were adding to this single narrative, where one deck, one card wasn't overshining the narrative or the information as the other. This one definitely feels Like the Dakini is the star of the show, and the Terra here is adding to that show. They are lifting the show up. They are the lights to the stage. That's how I would go about this pairing here. I think it's really fun. I think it's a one that feels the most different. It feels more shadowy. It feels a bit rougher around the edges in terms of messaging and questions to ask with these two, where the previous ones were rather neutral or feel a bit brighter because of the visuals. And I think they are really cool together. Well, that's my 5 pairings for PB January. Thanks for tagging me, Erin. This was a really fun addition to play into with my little Oracle deck chats we've been having. I think it's really important that we continue to experiment and to have an open mind and to approach this with curiosity, because that's how we're going to find what works and doesn't work for ourselves. And until you try it, don't knock it. So let me know what you think of pairing Oracle and Oracle. Do you think they stand alone without tarot? I certainly do, but I would love to hear your opinions down below. So until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.